It's the moment I have not been wanting to face. Okay, so quick backstory if you're new. Currently, I have $58,000 or so of student loan debt, and that balance was a lot higher a few years ago. So in all of the budget videos on my channel, I give an update on how much student loan debt I have left to pay off, but I usually leave out how much interest I'm paying every single month. And today I've decided to add up all of the student loan interest I have paid since borrowing these loans. And obviously the amount of student loan interest that I've paid has varied throughout the years because I have refinanced my loans a few times, and it just depends on the rate at which I've been paying off my loans. So the absolute value of that interest probably changed month to month, so I'm just gonna give you the total value of interest that I've actually paid. When I was getting ready to go to college, I decided to take out federal and private loans, and I did that every subsequent year depending on how much financial aid I received. I have already talked about how dumb that was, and I do regret it, but that is the reality of what I did. So in every year of my undergraduate program, I actually took out between $17,000 and $21,000 in student loan debt, particularly private student loans. This was accompanied by about $5,000 to $6,000 of federal student loans every year. And unfortunately, that can add up pretty quickly. Now, even though my school was actually paying me more than 50% of what it costs to actually go there per year, I still had to take out student loans to actually attend the school. And so in total, I ended up borrowing $76,000 in private student loans and $27,000 in federal student loans. That's just the principal amount that I borrowed in total every year. So when you add those numbers up, I actually borrowed $103,000 of student loans. So I've been in six figures of debt since I borrowed money for my senior year of college. The reason for that is that my private student loans automatically started accruing interest from the time that I started borrowing them. My federal student loans were a little different. Half of them were subsidized and the other half were unsubsidized loans. That essentially means that the subsidized loans do not accrue interest while you're in college, and the unsubsidized loans do. Normally, when you borrow student loans for an undergrad program, you have 6 months after graduation as a grace period before you're actually required to start making payments on these loans. So by the time December 2018 hit, I would have been required to pay minimum payments on both my private loans and on my federal student loans that I had borrowed. So let's talk about interest rates. The interest rate on my private student loans that totaled $76,000 by the time I graduated was between 7 and 10% interest rate. Do you know what happens when you have borrowed $76,000 over the course of 4 years that has an interest rate of 7 to 10%? Well, let's just say that it grows. My federal loans, on the other hand, had interest rates between 3.5 and 4.5%, which is a much lower interest rate than whatever my private loans had. And honestly, the reason why my private student loan interest rates were so high was because they were fixed interest rates. That means that my interest rates would never change over the whole term of the loan, and nothing would cause them to vary, whether it's a political shift or even some sort of market crash. So I really wanted to lock in my rate and ensure that it wouldn't change just in case something happened. You know, if you're my age, you've lived through a few recessions, and you know, something could happen. But I can assure you my rates definitely never changed throughout that time. My very first student loan payment actually happened in 2015. I was doing homework and then I got a little distracted, and I decided that I wanted to check on my Great Lakes account for my federal student loans. Oh wait, that doesn't make sense. I couldn't have borrowed just $5,000 to $6,000. I actually think I borrowed between $6,000 and $7,000 per year in federal student loans. So when I accessed my Great Lakes account, I saw that I had $175 in accrued interest, and I knew that I had at least $175 in my checking account at that time. So I just decided to pay it, and that was my very first student loan payment, and it was not followed until 3 years later. 3 years later, after I graduated college and August came around, so exactly 3 years ago, I decided to log into this account for the second time, and this time I saw $865.95 of interest accrued. And let me tell you, that was attached to $27,000 of principal balance. In that moment, I obviously had a little freak out, got over it, and then I decided to make my first big student loan payment of $865.95. So I decided to just wipe out the interest that same day, and that's really what began my debt-free journey. And when I did my taxes for 2018, I was able to fill out my student loan interest deduction, but first I needed the amount of interest that I actually paid that year in student loans. Turns out I paid $1,821 of interest just on my federal student loans in 2018 because those were the loans that I was mainly focusing on at that time. In 2019, I only had to pay $200 of student loan interest on my federal loans. So when you add that up, I've paid $2,196 in federal student loan interest total. This number is relatively low because I decided to be very aggressive about paying off my federal student loans first, and I did so within a year. And this $2,196 also includes the small amount of interest that I paid back in 2015. I'm sure that payment helped in the long run, so I'm very happy that 2015 me did that. Now on to private student loans. When I graduated in 2018, I had accrued $20,000 of private student loan interest. $20,000 of interest. So that's quite literally what happens when you have high interest rates on private student loans. In 2019, I paid $6,506 of private student loan interest. In 2020, I paid $4,472 of private student loan interest. So far in 2021, up until July 31st, I've paid off $1,479 of student loan interest, which amounts to a total of $32,457 of private student loan interest. When we add that to the federal student loan interest I paid, we come to an amount of $34,653 of student loan interest. Guys, that is a 20% down payment on a $150,000 house. I literally did this calculation today and I was expecting the 20K. I was not expecting 12K more. I feel robbed, but at the same time, I know I was robbed by myself when I decided to take out these loans. Mind you, the only reason it's not higher than this is because I refinanced my private student loans 5 times. 6 times if you count the time that I actually consolidated all of my private student loans. If you have private student loans, please look into refinancing. It is probably the best thing that you can do. And I don't even want to do the calculation of what this interest amount would be if A, I didn't refinance, or B, I didn't make extra payments on my loan. Obviously, a lot of people make the argument to invest rather than to pay off student loan debt, but that argument would have been completely invalid if I continue to have that 7 to 10% interest rate. Obviously, now I have a 2.78% interest rate on my private student loans, so maybe investing is a better idea. It's just my personal choice to pay off these loans as fast as possible because that is what will bring me peace. I want peace so badly. I am willing to sacrifice a few $1,000s that I might make in investments or that I may lose in investments. Definitely look into every single option that you have so that you don't lose as much money as you potentially could. With that said, I want to be added to the list of people who are reminding you that the student loan interest freeze on federal student loans is continued up through January of 2022. So if you've been still making payments and even making extra payments, this probably isn't going to affect you. But if you haven't been making payments, definitely start preparing for that or take advantage of this time to put the money that you would typically send towards payments into a high yield savings account or potentially a Roth IRA. And then I know you can take stuff out of a Roth IRA, but really it's meant for retirement. So that money is at risk once you invest it. Things could always happen. Or if you're really struggling with money, obviously use that money to make ends meet and start preparing an emergency fund for the future. So definitely take advantage of this interest rate freeze and keep in mind that that's one of the perks of having federal student loans versus private student loans. you don't always want to refinance the federal student loans. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more related content.